Geopolitical battle lines are being drawn. President Joe Biden has launched two new initiatives to rival China's international commercial ambitions. One is a global infrastructure program that looks to build physical and digital infrastructure connecting dozens of countries spanning Asia, Africa, and Europe. The other is a trade bloc in Asia-Pacific that encourages Western businesses to relocate elsewhere in the region away from China. It took Washington more than 10 years to develop these two programs. Up until now, there was no credible alternative to Chinese investments. And though the details have yet to be negotiated, the two initiatives make up the hallmarks of Biden's foreign policy. So, what is this about? And can America beat China at its own game? Today's video is sponsored by Ground News. I've been using this website and app for months to get a well-rounded view of the issues I discuss on this channel. It's essential to understand the story behind the story, and I highly encourage you to check it out as a resource. Today, they're giving CaspianReport viewers 15% off, so you can get access as little as $1 a month. Let me show you how it works. Here, I can quickly see how Biden's $600 billion investment plan is being covered by news outlets around the globe. First, Ground News rates the political bias of the sources reporting. So I can see that from a political perspective, the coverage is quite well distributed between the left, center, and right-leaning publications. What's interesting is how different countries are covering this news. Outlets from Canada, France, Germany, Britain, Saudi Arabia, Japan, Ukraine, and Russia have all reported on the plan. But unsurprisingly, no news outlets in China are covering this story. I love how I can easily move between these different outlets to see how they're framing this issue for a more nuanced perspective. We live in an increasingly complicated world, and it's about time we modernize the way we read the news. Go to ground.news/Caspian to take advantage of this one-time offer and support a small team of media outsiders working to make the news more transparent. Writing the new rules of the 21st century economy is not easy. At the G7 summit in June 2022, Biden and his counterparts launched the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, or PGII. At heart, the PGII is a reinvention of Biden's previously proposed Build Back Better World initiative, which sought to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. Drafted in 2021, Build Back Better World gained little traction despite vigorous lobbying. The primary problem was gathering support for the initiative at home. Consequently, the lack of public commitment made it difficult for Washington to finance the project independently. Not surprisingly, Build Back Better World failed to pass in Congress. Now, roughly a year later, Biden has reached a new deal to spread the burden of financing by teaming up with the other G7 countries. The new plan is for the G7 nations to mobilize $600 billion over the next 5 years to invest in global infrastructure projects. Most of these projects will take hold in middle and low-income countries, and most projects will be geared towards 4 categories: renewable energy, healthcare, gender equity, and digital infrastructure. Biden says that the plan will allow participating nations to see the concrete benefits of partnering with democracies. Either way, the United States has pledged to contribute $200 billion to the initiative, while Germany, France, and Italy will raise 300 billion euros, and the remaining of the total grant will come from the United Kingdom, Canada, and Japan. How much funding will come from the private and public sectors is unknown. Though impressive, America's Partnership for Global Infrastructure initiative still falls short in funding compared to its rival, the Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing's infrastructure project doesn't have an official price tag, but China has invested about 800 billion euros across the globe. which surpasses the investments promised by the G7. And China isn't done yet. Trillions more dollars are expected to be invested through the 6 arms of the Belt and Road Initiative in the coming decade. What's more, according to official Chinese data, Beijing has signed more than 170 cooperation agreements with 125 countries and another 29 agreements with international organizations across Asia, Europe, Africa, and South America. Matching the size and scope of China's grand strategy will be tricky, even for the G7 nations. But perhaps the biggest issue with the PGII, the elephant in the room if you will, is that the United States is bad at infrastructure investing. In fact, America is bad at maintaining its own physical infrastructure, let alone working on infrastructure projects abroad. It is by no means an accident. In 2020, Chinese firms won $2.3 billion worth of contracts outside China, while the United States gathered only $27 million worth of contracts. $2.3 billion versus $27 million is a staggering difference. America has a lot of strengths, but China is just better at building. Nevertheless, Biden's project could give China a run for its money. The PGII could provide some recipient nations with a feasible alternative to China. If implemented, the G7 infrastructure plan would reduce Beijing's influence in some places. For instance, in Angola, $2 billion will be invested in a solar-powered project, while $600 million will be invested to build a submarine telecommunications cable connecting Singapore to France through Egypt and the Horn of Africa. Still more, a multi-million-dollar vaccine manufacturing facility will be built in Senegal. These projects, and many others like it, would be constructed by either American or European companies. Doing so makes the Partnership for Global Infrastructure initiative less of a charity act and more of an investment to deliver returns for everyone. Yet, as promising as it sounds, in some places where the arms of the Belt and Road Initiative pass, Central Asia for instance, the geography and economy depend on either Russia or China. Biden's plan will make little to no difference in such places. The second part of Biden's endgame is the trade aspect. 1 month before signing the PGII in May 2022, Biden had rolled out a new type of economic agreement that included 13 nations in Asia-Pacific: Japan, India, Australia, South Korea, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines, Vietnam, New Zealand, Fiji, and Brunei. The deal, dubbed the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, or IPEF for short, is Biden's pivot to Asia to contain Chinese commerce at sea. The IPEF comes 5 years after Trump abandoned Obama's Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Trade deals are notoriously disliked in the United States, which is why Obama's proposal failed to deliver. Biden, however, is going in another direction, something more flexible and loose. Unlike its previous iteration, the IPEF does not guarantee free trade between its members. Instead, it is an understanding to deepen cooperation between the United States and the Asia-Pacific nations. The details have yet to be negotiated, but taken together with the United States, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity represents about 60% of the world's population and nearly 40% of the global GDP. Those are some serious numbers. The purpose of the economic alliance is to counter China's influence by enhancing political and economic cooperation within the region. The IPEF will focus on 4 pillars: supply chains, renewable energy, anti-corruption, and maritime trade. The members of the economic bloc will enjoy certain advantages from American companies that are looking to relocate away from China. So, as Western businesses move away from China in the coming decade, the IPEF has the potential to fill the vacuum. India, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines have large workforces that could step up and fill the void. The shortcoming, however, is that without greater access to the US market, the IPEF will lack the game-changing incentive to tip the balance. The terms are still being negotiated and the talks could last until 2023, but the fundamental question is whether or not Washington will offer lower tariffs or access to the US market. But since trade deals are difficult to close in the United States, the full reach of the IPEF is yet to be determined. Biden and his Asia-Pacific counterparts know this and see the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity as a stopgap policy that holds on to the belief that American domestic politics will come around and pivot to Asia. A sincere pivot this time. By any means, the greatest misconception in geopolitics is seeing the global order as a stable, immutable structure. America is still number one in criteria such as military, economy, and diplomacy. But the new kids on the block are increasingly challenging that role. China's Belt and Road Initiative has had a 10-year head start, and while the PGII and the IPEF are presented as America's triumphant countermove, it ultimately boils down to execution. A bad plan that is well executed will yield better results than a good plan that is poorly executed. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. Help us beat the algorithm by commenting, liking and sharing this video. Thank you for watching and Sarol.